Welcome to episode number 1 of the Cypress Stalker podcast with Ryan Carter.
Say what?
Yeah, this is, we had Ryan Carter on with us today, and he owned the podcast.
He's a natural,
I thought
man.
maybe we need to change the name.
He is a pro. I think you might have said it somewhere within the podcast. Like, Ryan Carter will have a podcast someday. That dude, he literally is a pro. I was sitting there thinking, I wish.
This is the Down South Hunting podcast presented to you by the Onyx Hunt app. But Ryan takes over later on, so y'all can look forward to that.
Yeah, definitely. It was a good conversation, man. I was really intrigued and entertained by what this guy is out there doing. It's always really cool for me to like run into someone that's a hunter and probably 10 times more passionate or crazy than I am, And I think Ryan fits the bill.
Yeah. So my first hunt is coming up this week, after this weekend, basically. So I'm excited to actually get my hunting season kicked off, but I really wanted to get somebody on with the podcast with us that's actually done some hunting before and done some killing. And Ryan definitely fit the bill. But I also know that my co-host here, you got some blood on the ground as well. So why don't you tell us about your hunt?
Man, so it's kind of the point in the season. It's like I need a little confidence booster. And I've got a few spots, not too many, especially on public land. I don't have a ton of them where they hold a lot of deer. And I'm not wasn't expecting to see any big bucks or anything, but we're completely out of deer meat in the freezer, and it was time to fill it up. So I ended up going to a small little parcel, about 20 acres of public land. And I've told you, and I've talked a lot about it on the podcast, it's hard to find public land with land access. I mean, most of the places I'm accessing now are by water. So this is one of those areas where I can just walk in. It's loaded with deer. I found it last year. It's not even on normal maps, so I'm not going to go too deep into details on how we ended up finding this piece of property. But you're not going to find it on normal TWRA like WMA maps. But it is a piece of public land, and went and scouted it last year right after deer season, and it was just covered up with deer beds. I'm talking like you could tell it was definitely like doe bedding because it just group bedding all around, covered up and scat. Ended up on some of the backside of the property, a lot of single beds with rubs coming out of them. So, definitely some bucks in there. Some of the rubs, kind of like that waist high type height. So the property has potential to hold some bucks, but it's getting pounded by pressure. Come to find out, there's probably only 5 guys in town that I know of that's hunting it, but that's 5 guys on 20 acres. And I know it's already been hunted one time by my hunting partner and his friend. And when we set up in our location, so 10 yards away from the tree that we're set up in is another tree that's got fresh climbing scrapes. So somebody's had a climbing tree stand up in 10 yards away from where we're set up. And I did set up with my buddy. I brought my camera with us. I brought my saddle. I really wanted to do either a self-film kill or get Brandon on film killing. And, even a better scenario would be us both killing. So we kind of flipped a coin or drew straws going in, and Brandon was going to shoot first, or I was going to shoot if I had the better shot. Well, again, I was in a saddle, and the way we're set up is there's a bunch of houses in a neighborhood on the backside of this property, and pushing back in towards the water, it gets really thick and a lot of bedding cover. That's really where we found all the deer bedding. And right in between that, the lake comes in and kind of pinches down. So it gets really shallow, and it connects two pieces of property. So it's like really thick bedding on one side, and then it opens up into some more like of an oak flat on this side. So where we're at is literally where the water pinches down, gets about 2 to 3 feet. You can see deer trails just run all the way through there. So really, I was not surprised to see somebody else's tree stand there. It's a no-brainer where to hang a tree stand. That's why Brandon and I both felt like we had a good chance of killing a deer. There's a big white oak 20 yards in front of us, dropping acorns all afternoon long, just pop, pop, pop. Squirrels are eating on that thing. Well, to make a long story short, I'm up there in my saddle. This is my very first time in the saddle. I can say that through my practice sessions with the saddle, I've been very comfortable. But when I got up there this time, I got my tether too high and I was having some hip pinch. So I have been I was having to work on that and like really try to keep myself, from wiggling and trying to be still, which is a little bit tough. But, after a while, I kind of figured out what was going on, fixed my saddle, got better, better situated. Anyways, long story short, these two deer come up behind us and down the trail that we actually walked in on, which is not what we were anticipating at all. And once they got to about where we had crossed over to the tree stand, they called our scent, jumped back up to my left and through a really thick opening. And I could tell Brandon definitely didn't have a shot. So I ended up kind of leaning over on my platform and leaning out to the side of the tree and making a good shot, man. It was like 20 yards. I hit the deer just a little bit far back, but it came out perfectly. I didn't think, it would be a big issue tracking it. But anyways, you probably have some questions. But at that point, I think, at this point of the hunt, I think I've got a dead deer. Easily got a dead deer.
Yeah, you're like taking cues from the interview we just did with Ryan. You just keep going.
I was going to try to pause and give you a chance.
Yeah, so you mentioned the saddle a few times. And just for anybody that isn't familiar, we interviewed the guys from Tethered back in episode 41, which convinced Ab and I both to give a saddle a try. So if you're not familiar with a saddle, go check that episode out. They're kind of like the latest craze, I guess. They've been around for a long time, but they're suddenly becoming really popular, especially in the podcast world. So yeah, I guess before we get into your whole trail thing, like give me kind of quick rundown on your saddle setup and like what your general feelings on it so far is.
Man, general feelings so far, I'm hearing a lot of guys not using sticks. They're using like the Wild Edge steps and different things. I think that's great. But I did go in with Lone Wolf sticks. I think that's a great climbing method. It's something I'm used to. I've been doing it for a long time. That's how I got up in the tree. And then from there, I have a Predator platform, which is also made by Tethered. That worked pretty well, but I could also see why people would want to have the wraparound steps, because what I did was I had my platform off to the side, but also had my stick with a step close to that. So I could pretty much make it around the tree, 180 degrees. If I could have another step to my, say on my left and my right, man, I could make it all the way around a tree. And that would be super comfortable. So like a ring of steps would work out pretty good. But as far as that platform, the saddle itself, I felt super safe. I'll say that. Like at first I was a little bit freaked out because, you're 20, I was probably 20 feet plus up in the air. This is the first time I'm that high in the saddle, and you're like clipping in that first time and leaning back. So once you get over that first lean, I think you're good. But when I was down close to the ground, like one stick off, I was like, oh yeah, just leaning around, swinging like a monkey, doing whatever. But
I mean, it's kind of like rappelling, right? Like the first time you lean off, it's like, all right, is this rope really supposed to hold me?
Exactly. And then I would double check in my carabiner to make sure it was locked 100 times there.
Not a bad idea. Not a bad idea.
I just had all these crazy ideas of me falling through it, but there's no way that was going to happen. Super safe. And again, I'd never been able to make the shot on the deer without the saddle. And I also self-filmed this one. And I did that because I stopped filming because it was so stinking hard to carry a camera and a tree stand.
So you brought a guy with you to film it, and then you self-filmed.
And I self-filmed. And I almost forgot to hit the record button. So I'm definitely not good at this, but I tried.
So quick question about the saddle. What about, could you use one of your Lone Wolves and just set your platform at the same height as your top stick, so then you could still use your stick?
You could, but I wouldn't.
No, because you're not high enough.
Yeah, I think maybe I'm not following your question well enough. Maybe it's too late.
Like your top stick, instead of like stepping up onto your platform,
mm-hmm.
you'd step at the same level. So you could step from your platform onto the top step of your top stick without stepping down, which means you could cover more of the tree, right?
That's what I did basically.
Oh,
100%. Like I would
an idea because you already did it.
That's exactly.
I mean, maybe it was a great idea, but it wasn't original.
I would say the stick was maybe like 6 inches lower than the platform. But next time I'm really going to try to make sure that it's kind of on the same level.
Yeah. Yep. And you notice as well, we're not sponsored by Tethered, so we don't have to only say the good things. You notice some noise and stuff coming from your platform too. You're going to have to work on that a little bit. If
you guys buy a platform from Tethered, I would go ahead and I would disassemble it, and I would put some bowstring wax around the bolt and the nut. Just wax it up really good. And that's my one recommendation, because if you don't, mine personally, anytime I would shift or make any type of movement, it would make a very noticeable pop. And that's definitely not something you want happening in the woods. But I've read on the internet, guys are taking care of that basically by putting some bowstring wax on everything, and maybe do some other things, maybe some felt on the back of that stopper where the bolt is.
You can put some stealth strips on there.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to do that for sure. Going to order some more of that.
Cool. So what's next for you hunt-wise? Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Don't tell me. Let's hear about the blood trail. I'm skipping ahead.
Oh, man.
I intentionally didn't even hear the whole story because I wanted to do this on the podcast. I'm going to skip over the good part.
To the blood trail. Yeah. So, I said I made a good shot. Deer was broadside. I could tell I might have hit it a little bit back, but the angle and everything, I thought it'd be perfect to hit. I got over there. We couldn't find the arrow, which, you're getting there in the dark and like, dadgummit, making sure this is exactly where the deer was standing. So, the arrow ended up about 10 yards away from where I actually shot her. So, it obviously stayed inside of her for a little while. But when we did find the arrow was really good blood. I mean, you could tell had bubbles in it. It was definitely long blood. It was red. But then that was it, man. Like, we found one speck of blood 20 yards further down the trail, because we ended up, it was like, okay, there's no blood anywhere. So we started looking for the trails, because the deer ended up following another deer out. And so we took that trail. Sure enough, there was a speck of blood. Then another 20 yards, speck of blood. And I'm not talking like quarter size. I'm talking speck. There's no blood coming out of this deer at all. And then I think we found one more speck of blood on the same trail. And that was it. We were out there for 2.5 hours and no blood to be found anywhere. So we started doing a couple of things at that point. First of all, we pulled up Onyx. We backtracked and we hit the blood trail. So we dropped waypoints of blood trail, and trying to figure out, where is this deer headed based off like topography lines. So you could literally see that she was following the topography lines, which in essence was the trail that the deer have worn down on the little, and it's not that, it's not steep, it's not hilly terrain, but still it's kind of crazy how they'll follow these topography lines on your map. To make a long story short, we started doing a grid search. We grid searched back the way towards where the trail was going and towards the road. We hit the road and looked, for any kind of blood back on the asphalt. No, nothing there. We came back to the last point of blood. We went back towards the water. Nothing that way. And then the last thing is we tried going back to where she had came from originally. So did she try to circle back around us? And sure enough, man, we just thankfully walked up on her. That's what she did. She had tried to maybe try to circle us, maybe scent check us. Who knows what she was doing, but that's exactly what she did. And that's where we found her. So, oh man, 3 hours or so of a blood trail and getting her out of there. But it was definitely well worth it. And finally got some meat in the
3
freezer.
hours. So how much ground did you probably cover?
Oh, as far as how far did she go?
Yeah, how far did you go and how far did she go?
She didn't go over 60 yards.
Oh yeah.
I'm serious. She might have went further than that, but where she died from the tree, I'm going to say between 60 and 100 yards.
That's crazy. Couldn't see her. I got, just too thick. It was back in that bedding area.
It was so thick back in there, and thankfully we stumbled upon her. We walked the whole thing out. That 20 acres, we covered probably almost all of it.
When you're back in that bedding area, could you like just smell deer back there?
During the wintertime, I could, for sure.
Yeah.
It was like moist. Just, the different times of year. This time of year, it's hot and humid. It's a little harder for me to pick up scent like that. But during the wintertime, it had that deery kind of smell to it.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy when you're like trying to blood track a deer and you go through like that bedding area. You can actually like smell where the deer have been sometimes, and sometimes you actually smell your deer. I've had it before where you smell the deer before you see it. Kind of get a general direction. A lot easier if it's like a gut shot deer and you get downwind. But anyway, well, cool, man. Well, that's an exciting way to start the season out. So got it done on public land, out of your new saddle. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. And if you guys want to, you can check it out, the YouTube video. So maybe I'll link that in the show notes.
Yeah, that's on the Down South Hunting Podcast YouTube, right?
No, it's not actually. It's on my personal.
What's up with that?
It was a little janky, man. I didn't want to put it on our YouTube channel.
It was worthy of the Down South Hunting Podcast.
I honestly had to. I was like, yeah, is this really worthy of the podcast? So
yeah, and actually, you sent me a link to it, and I was driving. Fortunately, for the purposes of this story, I didn't watch the video while I was driving, so I haven't seen it yet.
That's good. You should go check it out. Now, then you'll know why it's not on the Down South Podcast YouTube channel.
All right. So, I guess anybody. What's your personal YouTube channel then? Adam Cruz.
I have no idea. I'll link it.
Like lots of videos of like your kids dancing and you doing awkward stuff.
Pretty much, yeah.
Cool.
I think there's a turkey hunt on there.
Adam's personal YouTube page.
Yeah, you don't have to do that actually, but that's where you'll have to find this video. There is a turkey hunt on there, so it's a pretty cool turkey hunt. My son shoots a turkey in the face with a wad, but like the turkey's so close, the wad hits it in the face, and you can see it on the instant replay. And the turkey flies off, but we didn't hit the turkey.
I have seen that. That's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
So yeah, what's next? What's next for you hunting?
Next for me, man, just getting back into some public land around home and Kentucky in November. And I know yours is next weekend, you said?
Yeah, so I drew a quota hunt for a really good area, and I'm talking to my wife last week, I think it was. Maybe it was the week before, but either way, we were kind of going through the schedule and everything. Turns out we have like a family camping trip planned that weekend, and it's not just my family, it's like a bunch of families from my kids' school that are planning on going. So Saturday night, I'm gonna miss the first day of that hunt. But I'm gonna go out Sunday, and it goes for a few days after that. So yeah, man, I'm excited to get out in the woods. It's a place I've got a couple cameras hung, and I've never hunted the place before, so I'm excited about having the saddle and just kind of wearing it in and looking for hot sign and hunting where it's at. So we talked about before the season, we kind of did a talk about what we wanted to do, and this is kind of falling right into it. I have scouted the area a couple times, so I have a couple general ideas where I might want to go, but certainly don't have like trees set up. I don't have bucks picked out. I'm just kind of going in blind, but it's a pretty good area. So, man, I'm excited just to get in a tree.
So are you considering maybe keeping that saddle, like your height, at a really low level, maybe like one stick or even less? I'm hearing a lot of guys online that they're doing that and are really like hunting that way to begin with. I don't know if that's something you've thought about, but you might try it out.
I tried it in my yard the other day. I'm not too worried about the heights. I can't say like my setup is very efficient, but my plan is I think I'm just going to be hunting afternoons for the most part. It goes on during the week, so I'm going to be trying to go after work. And, this area is like within decent driving distance of where I live. So I'll be going home every night afterwards. That's kind of the plan. So, but all of that said, I think I'll be hunting at regular height. I feel like the way I'm set up, I'm going to have to be able to get away with a decent amount of movement. Like I haven't figured out like my optimal setup yet, and I'm going to be doing it on the fly. It just came in the mail like last week. So, I feel like hunting close to the ground, I'd get busted for moving pretty easily.
I'll say this, man, as far as being like skylined, you're a whole lot less skylined out of the saddle than you ever would be out of a tree stand, especially if you are sitting or straddling that tree, which I did a lot of. Like I'd literally just straddle the tree and just kind of let it hold me there. So I think that was really perfect to hide you and conceal you.
I have a feeling I'm going to hunt Sunday night, and then like between Sunday night and also I have family pictures that are Monday night.
What?
Man, just got like so much going on. And I would like, if I didn't have other hunts lined up for the like if this was it for the season, obviously I'd be like, all right, listen, I'm hunting this weekend. It's got to be what it is. But I'm not burning all of my hunting, my hunting brownie points or goodwill towards hunting the first week of the season. So
No, I wouldn't either. Hold on to those.
yeah, but I'm excited. So I'm gonna miss a couple days, but it's a several day hunt, so I'm gonna get out when I can. The bigger thing for me is we talked about this before. I don't live in a place where I can just go hunting after work whenever. So I got to be smart about when I go, because basically it's like when I hunt, I'm gone for the whole night or the whole weekend or whatever. So, it's speaking of being gone for a whole weekend, I'm not sure my sandbar hunt's going to be going on, considering a hurricane just blasted that island that those sandbar deer live on. So, that's to be seen if they're going to continue that hunt or not. Hopefully they do, but I totally understand if they can't do it.
Yeah, man, that area looks like it's in pretty rough shape.
Yeah, I talked to a friend who I know listens, and he's got some family up in that area, and he told me today that his mom's house had no roof, his sister's house was half gone, and his brother's house was completely gone.
Dang.
So yeah, pretty devastating, man. I think. I was pretty interested because I got family up in the Panhandle, and praise God, they're all fine, and their houses are all fine and all that stuff. But definitely, if the Down South podcast would keep Chris in their prayers and all the other people up in that area, definitely devastating to some people up there. It wasn't a huge storm size wise, but it did a lot of damage, and in the area it did hit hard. So,
Definitely.
Yep, man. So let's get back into talking hunting. I definitely, keep them in your prayers. But man, I am excited to get this going with Ryan here. Definitely some entertaining stories, and I think everybody's going to like it a lot.
All right, let's get him on the line.
Hey, before we get him though, a quick reminder: huntinggeardeals.com. We've been getting tons of traffic, so I appreciate that, and I know like a good portion of that's coming from the podcast, which is. Honestly, part of the reason I started it, and it's, the podcast has grown to be a lot more than that. But I really do appreciate our listeners supporting that site. It helps me out a bunch. And also speaking of support, I know you've noticed this too, Adam. We've gotten a lot more messages lately, emails, messaged on social media. I've seen more reviews lately, and let me just say that means a ton to us. Anytime like there's somebody that's willing to reach out and spend time like telling us what the podcast means to them, I can't tell you, how much that means to us.
Yeah, it really helps our motivation level too. If nothing else, to get a really nice message that says thanks or whatever, or even just bounces questions off of us. I just think it helps overall.
Yep. I mean, we definitely see the download numbers, and that's been growing, and there's more and more of them every week, which is awesome. But to be able to like actually put people, names and faces on social media and whatever with those people is pretty neat. So I just wanted to say thanks before we jump in the interview.
Yeah, and I think one thing we've never really asked, well, we might have asked a couple of times, but we probably should ask more, is if you have topics you want to hear about or for us to talk about, shoot us over a message and let us know what those topics are, or any kind of entertaining guests you may know of that we could possibly talk to that are Southern hunters. We would like to spot them and prospect them out.
Yeah, awesome. Yep, we're always looking for new ideas and fun stuff to talk about. So
sure, man.
All right, man, let's do it. All right, we've got Ryan Carter on the line. I'm really excited to talk to him tonight because I know he's got some really cool stories to share with us. Basically, Ab and I, in celebration of the season get going and some deer hitting the ground, wanted to talk to some other hunters that have had some success this year. And I saw Ryan's story and knew that we had to do an interview with him. So welcome to the Down South Hunting Podcast, Ryan.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I guess if you could, so we don't really even know you other than social media, just Facebook. So could you just, I guess, introduce us to you and tell us where you're from, what you do, that kind of stuff?
Sounds great. So yeah, my name again is Ryan Carter. 35, born and raised in Alva, Florida, which is, if you don't know where Alva is, it's just outside of Fort Myers, Florida. It's kind of out in the country. I'm fourth generation cracker, and that means I was born and raised in Florida. And so I've got some pretty deep roots here. My family, it kind of came from the cattle ranching era, and grew up on a small cattle ranch and kind of grew up outdoors. One of 6 boys, and I've got two little guys myself, a little boy and a little girl. My little girl's the only girl granddaughter in the family out of 13. There's one girl.
Man,
so I'm the proud father of a little girl, and she is going to be an outdoorsman, let me tell you.
Well, that's pretty cool.
So yeah, I just I grew up here. I grew up in the outdoors. Grew up on the water, in the woods. Every chance I got, or every chance my dad had an opportunity to, me and my brothers we were in the woods. We were on the water. We were underwater. Just kind of living the dream, so to speak, on a very, very low budget.
Before the podcast, man, you're talking about taking the whole summer off to go fishing. What do you do for a job?
Well, I don't take the summer off to go fishing necessarily. I take.
You meant he takes the summer off of hunting to go fishing.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm actually working. I'm in construction. My brother's a general contractor, and I do some subcontract work for him. Right now, we're still doing a lot of hurricane repair work, things of that nature. We build some homes from the ground up. But I try to stay low key. I kind of have a niche market. I do most of the work that nobody else wants to do. And so there's plenty of that out there right now.
So before we started recording, we had talked to you about this hunting trip, but we're definitely going to get into. But you said you had quite the turkey season too. You want to start off just telling us how your turkey season went?
Sure. Interesting thing is I didn't grow up turkey hunting. I grew up in the woods, and then we had a ranch and we had turkeys all over it. Just didn't hunt them. My dad didn't hunt them. My grandparents didn't really hunt them. Not saying they didn't shoot them, just they didn't really hunt them, at least properly. And so I kind of fell into it a couple of years ago with a good buddy of mine. He'd been begging me to go turkey hunting. And so last year he had a permit, and I went on a permit, and when we went in, and I mean, opening day of my hunt, I waxed a beautiful Osceola turkey, a swamp chicken, some people call them. And it was just a tremendous hunt, and I kind of got the bug for it, or the itch for it right then. And this year I drew that very same permit, and we had a tremendous season. I actually have my uncle, he still ranches, and so I had the opportunity to hunt one of his leases. Opening morning, me and a buddy of mine were able to arrow two Osceolas opening morning out of the same blind, one at first light. It was almost like duck hunting, actually. The dang thing flew over the decoy and dropped flew over the ground blind and dropped right into the decoys. And unfortunately, there wasn't a whole lot of footage because I still don't have quite that much patience. But yeah, I shot a beautiful bird, about an 8.5 inch beard, probably a 2.5-year-old, maybe a 3-year-old. My buddy was telling me I don't really know much about aging turkeys. I just shoot them. And he shot a nice bird after that. And then after that, we went down to the Cypress and had a 7-mile bike ride in, another mile walk on top of that. And we were just completely covered up with gobblers this spring. It was incredible. They were in every direction, and they were fired up. So I was able to take a second turkey, a second gobbler, with my bow in Big Cypress this year, and both of them on film. My buddy that killed his, Jordan, on the lease with me, he missed in his words, a bird of a lifetime, an Osceola of a lifetime down the Cypress. And then followed that up 2 days later with a very respectable bird with about a 9-inch beard. So, and again, everything on film, which was, part of it. Sometimes it feels like, the harder you work to do something, the better it feels. It's, kind of interesting you say that, to explain it that way, but, biking in 7 miles, I had to build a trailer for my bike to be able to carry the ground blind and the chairs and the tripod and the camera and the bow and the decoys and so on and so forth. And we're leaving the truck at 3 a.m. on the bike to head in to get in. It's just pretty epic season. And to be able to capture all that on film, to be able to share it with my kids and grandkids is something I really, really, really enjoy.
So I'm intrigued. Why the bow? It's hard enough to kill a turkey with a shotgun, and man, you're like hitting 7 miles plus walking one more and carrying a bow. So you're like hardcore.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know. I just feel like I want to kill everything with my bow. I don't know what it is. I love bow hunting. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love carrying a muzzleloader and a shotgun and a rifle just the same. And I get just as excited, doing so, but there's just something about that extra challenge. And I guess last year when I went down there, I mean, this gobbler came in at 12 yards, and I just felt like having a 12 gauge in my hand was a little bit unfair.
Yeah.
Of course, when it didn't go off the first time I pulled the trigger, I didn't quite feel that way. But yeah, no, I don't know what it was. My buddy, he missed that bird of a lifetime. He didn't actually miss it. He had a twig and his arrow was deflected. So in retrospect, he missed it. But he didn't bring a bow back the next morning. He went ahead and brought the shotgun down.
So are y'all normally hunting from blind? I mean, I've been pretty intrigued with guys turkey hunting here lately without blinds, and with a bow, obviously. So have you ever tried that? I mean, is that something
I haven't tried it yet. But I do want to try that, with some type of a decoy on the end of my stabilizer or something. I think that would be pretty neat. I really, really think that'd be pretty neat. I mean, and I don't think it would be that difficult. I mean, so long as his concentration is on the decoys and not on you and you draw back, I think you'd be okay. If you're decoy hunting, of course.
Yeah.
But, no, this year everything was out of a ground blind. And just, I don't know, it's great to have that ground blind there, but it kind of hinders your capabilities of filming and running and gunning as well. But it just happened to work out this year. We put enough time in scouting that we had a really good idea of the amount of birds in that area. And so we were able to pretty well just kind of stay put and let them come to us.
Well, in most situations on public land, I probably wouldn't have a blind, but also wouldn't go 8 miles back. So I'm guessing I'm guessing you're probably getting away from people. So you don't really have to worry about that.
Yeah. I don't think there was anybody within 4 miles of us.
Dang, that's awesome. I wish I had places I could go 8 miles back. I guess I probably would if I did, but that's pretty unique right there.
It really is something, in the way I almost look at it, because this was it was a permitted hunt. So they only allow so many permits in there. And like I was telling my buddy, I was like, man, Jordan, essentially we're going 7-8 miles back in here. We have 30,000 acres to ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nobody else back in here. There's no other access points. So, I mean, it was sometimes the hard work pays off. Sometimes it doesn't, but it just feels better. For whatever reason, the harder you work for it, the more of an adventure it becomes, and the more enjoyable and the better the stories tend to be. And so people think I'm crazy, but hey, that's okay.
Hey, Adam, do you remember what Steve Rinella calls that? The, what is it? The score or whatever of like how hard a hunt is? No,
I know what you're talking about, but I can't remember what he.
Man, we were so bad at this. Yeah. Like somebody will message us afterwards. By the way, anthropomorphism. That's the word we were looking for last time. We got some messages about that. Man, what is it?
So Ron, this is the second podcast in a row that we've tried to quote Steven Rinella and not been ready to quote Steven
Rinella. That's true. It was him last time too.
It was Steve Rinella. That's meat eater, right?
Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Yeah,
he's a great. Anyway, I love that show.
It basically the value of a hunt is based on like how like different difficulty levels in it. So public land makes it higher, and using a bow makes it higher, and man, it's something like truth or something like that. This is not like good podcast listening because there are like hundreds of people yelling at their phones and trying to tell us what the word is right now.
And then we can't hear them.
Yeah.
And all I can think about, Ron, is I want to see your videos because, man, you have me intrigued with your style. So we'll have to get all that information from you later.
Yeah.
Are these videos online anywhere?
They're not yet. We have we're really slacking on the editing part. I have them in my Google Photos, account, and they're just little short clips for now, just basically the kill shot, the money shot, I guess. But hopefully we'll get them posted somewhere on YouTube at some point.
Yeah, you're gonna have to you're gonna have to post like some highlights on your Instagram page or something.
I should do that. I was thinking about waiting to the end of the year and just kind of doing a full year recap, but maybe I'll just go ahead and pop them on there.
Maybe just like like a quick little preview. It doesn't have to be the whole deal. Yeah. Just so can you kind of give us like a quick rundown of like what Big Cypress is? Because I know we're talking about this for this turkey hunt, and then you did some more hunting there as well. And a lot of our listeners from across the South or even across the U.S. aren't familiar with that area. Can you kind of tell us about the habitat down there?
Sure. Big Cypress is a very diverse piece of property. It is essentially the Everglades. And I think they just closed the unit due to lack of animal or lack of deer, I suppose. But basically 565,000 acres of public land. I mean, it's massive. It's just this great big giant piece of property. Some of it's sawgrass just for miles and miles and miles. And believe it or not, there's deer out there. Some of it's great big giant cypress strands and cypress heads that are just so thick that you can barely walk through. Other parts of it are oak swamps. A lot of it prairie, the what I call pine islands, which are, pine heads with some cabbage and palmetto, something that's usually up out of the water a little bit. Sometimes in the spring, obviously, it's pretty well all dry. Maybe the center of your flag ponds or maybe an old water hole. But like right now, this time of the year, if you're not hunting in water, you're not hunting in Big Cypress, period. I mean, anywhere from high ankle to waist deep water at times to cross certain areas. And it can be a very intimidating place to hunt as well. Part of that is the heat, how hard it is to access. They still do allow some buggy traffic. I think there's some units that you can ride swamp buggies in and airboats in. And we still do a little bit of that. My dad does actually. He actually was down this weekend as well, for opener of muzzleload, and he was able to harvest, him and a buddy of his were able to harvest 2 bucks as well. They were smaller deer. He's more of a traditional, just straight up a meat hunter, at least until he has meat for the year. So they shot a 3-point and a 4-point, nothing spectacular, but 3-point in that zone, fork and horn on one side is legal. So, hey, you put all the effort in, you spend all the money. There's a lot of different ways to look at it, but Big Cypress itself is just it's a very diverse place. And, people talk about how hard it is to walk. You walk a mile in the swamp down there and it'll break you down. I mean, dragging your feet through the water, picking them up and over the grass, the muck and the mud. It can be rather difficult. I almost had a heat stroke this past weekend, as a matter of fact, but I managed to make it out. Thank goodness for there being water everywhere. I was able to drink it. Otherwise, I was completely out.
You bring a filter with you, or you're just like,
I did bring a filter. Yeah, I did bring a filter. But it just got to the point where sucking it through the filter was too difficult. So I just started splashing it in my hands to mouth, and probably not the smartest thing to do, but I figured if the deer can do it, the bears can do it, the panthers can do it. Well, I'm not that much different.
Yeah. Hopefully you don't hit us back in 4 weeks from the hospital because you're
some amoeba or something going on. Right.
Oh man.
So, but yeah, it's just a very difficult place to access, and because of that, it can be very intimidating. They've got pythons down here. We've got alligators, obviously. A buddy of mine came face to face with a 9-foot alligator walking into a stand this weekend. Thank goodness he's still around to tell that story. We've got cottonmouths, we've got rattlesnakes and everything else, the pygmy rattlers, and they're just anywhere and everywhere. So yes, I do wear snake guards. Having children changed my opinion on that. Well, looking up snake bites online, I'll actually change my opinion on that because that's just nasty.
I think I need a snake suit at this point of the story.
Ooh, yeah. Because if you're in waist deep water, snake guards from your ankles to your knees aren't really helping much, are they?
No. Adam, you'd be like walking out there with chainmail on.
Dude, I'd have to parachute in. That's about it.
Yeah, it's and it's one of these places where you don't have to have a permit to hunt for the most part, at least in most of the units. You don't have to draw a permit. There's no lottery. There is a lottery for the first 9 days of general gun. But for archery for muzzleload, you buy a hunting license, you buy a management area stamp, a deer stamp, an archery permit, whatever it is you need, and you go hunt. And yeah, in public land, anybody can go. But the way I look at it is, if you're hunting next to somebody, it's because you choose to. And you've got 565,000 acres. Find somewhere else to go.
You always know a place is tough to hunt if somebody's willing to publicly state online like where they killed something. It's like a public land area. Yeah,
it's funny actually. A buddy of mine, he was asking me about it, and he was, "Hey man, you send me a pin drop of where you killed that buck at?" I said, "Sure, absolutely, no problem." Ding, send him a pin drop of exactly where I killed the buck at, and where all the buck sign was and everything. And he goes, "Man, I can't believe you actually sent that to me." I said, "I know you're not going in there. There's absolutely no way you're going in there, at least not without me." He goes, "Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm not. That place intimidates the hell out of me."
So going back to these turkey real quick, how do you scout out and know where birds are 7 miles in? I mean, is that something you guys went to ahead of time, or is this knowledge over years?
It's knowledge over the last 2 years, but also a lot of cyber scouting. Just, kind of looking for water, looking for places that may still be holding water. Obviously, we were on some birds in there last year, and we heard a couple of gobbles back in this particular area. But looking for kind of little openings on the edge of big cypress heads that would likely have a willow bed inside them. And you can usually tell that from Google Earth, that, that's holding some water. And so, again, I'm not a turkey expert like my buddy Jordan is. And so from what he tells me, they like to roost over water oftentimes, as often as possible. And so finding those cypress heads that are still holding water in the spring tend to pay off. And then from then, it's just putting the footwork in, just looking for the sign, looking for the tracks, the dust bowls, and then opening morning, hoping you're in the right area. And if you're not, well, make some adjustments in the next couple of days to get on the birds.
Hey, Adam.
But yeah, we spend a lot of time looking at screens.
My first thought was, hey, we need to have this guy Jordan on before spring turkey. Yeah. But my second thought was, no, we don't. We need to get in touch with this guy Jordan and go get our Osceolas before we have him on the podcast.
I've already been thinking about that. And I've been looking at this big cypress. I had no clue where big cypress was. And, you pull up South Florida, and it's like the whole southern tip of Florida is big cypress. That's freaking huge.
Exactly.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
So how much of that area is actually huntable? Like you mentioned, they've closed some areas just because of the lack of game. Because of the water, is it only like 10% of that acreage actually huntable land?
Oh, no. I'd say probably 90% of it.
Oh, wow.
I mean, that water does not affect the deer. I've watched deer wading in, upper, their bellies dragging the water, and they're out there feeding around. I've seen deer on camera lay down in water, in 6 inches of water, just lay down. So sometimes I feel like they have a snorkel because they just disappear on you, and you think you'd hear them walk off in the water, and you don't. But I don't know if they learn how to swim underwater or what the deal is. But I'd say probably 90 to 95% of it's huntable. Some of it gets just really, really, really thick. I tend to hunt on the edge of the thick stuff. I like to stalk if I have to. Sometimes I like to tree stand hunt, but I also like to stalk, especially in archery down here in September in Big Cypress. And typically in the rest of the south zone of Florida, archery opens like July 30th, first week of August, somewhere in that ballpark. But Big Cypress, being that it's a nationally run park, it's a government-run park, did not change the regulations a few years back when the season dates changed. I actually like that. It gives me an opportunity to hunt for a month and then go hunt big cypress that hasn't been hunted at all. So it's almost like it's just opening again, archery. So it really gives me 2 full months of bow hunting, which I absolutely love. And in September in the cypress, there's usually a good bit of chasing going on. For whatever reason, the deer down there respond quite well to a grunt call. I don't know why it is. I know a lot of people say, nah, deer don't respond to a grunt call in Florida. Down there they do. I can't tell you how many times me and friends and brothers, we have called bucks in simply by grunting without even a grunt call, just literally grunting with your mouth. Meh. And they come right to you for whatever reason. When they're chasing, when they're looking, it just happens that way. So stalking, being able to spot a buck at 300-400 yards sometimes and being, trying to get around and get upwind of them or get downwind of them and putting a stalk on and then grunting a deer in can be rather exciting.
What time of year are you, trying to call these deer in? You mentioned September, and I know also that South Florida has a weird rut timing. So when is that rut timing, and when are they really responding to calls, or is that basically all through the deer season?
No, it's not at all, actually. First couple of weeks of September, at least in the cypress, is in that area, in the Collier County area, is when I've had the best luck with them responding to a call. This year I had 2 different occasions take place. One, a decent little 6-point had nothing to do with me, wanted nothing to do with a grunt call whatsoever. He was feeding. He was not looking. He wasn't chasing. He wasn't doing anything. The very next weekend, I had an encounter with a really nice 8 or 9-point that was locked up with a doe. And I was able to grunt both the doe and the buck back in and almost put an arrow in him. He just was a little bit smarter than I was, and he managed to get downwind of me. And as he was coming in, he kept circling downwind. But usually it's about September. The rut down here, like you said, is very, very all over the place. So the primary rut is supposed to be end of July through probably the 2nd to 3rd week of September down here. However, I've seen spotted fawns in September. And so I think a doe will carry 7 months. So if she carries 7 months, let's say she dropped that fawn in, I don't know, first week of August. I mean, she was bred in January.
Yeah.
So
that's almost like that, lower Alabama type rut.
Yeah, well, I think, and again, I'm not a biologist. I'm not an expert of any kind, but I think it has a lot to do with the fact that we're not allowed to kill or harvest does at all in the cypress, not at archery, not any time ever. And the buck to doe ratio in certain areas can be horrible. I've seen as many as 30 deer in a day in one rack buck. And so I feel like because of that, they're not able to breed the does. And so the doe just continues to come in heat. And whenever a buck comes around and she comes in heat and they do their thing, and hey, we have a baby fawn in September.
Yeah, I think there's probably some truth to that. And I also think because of the weather in South Florida, there's not the I think a lot of weather in different states keeps the deer population in check. So I've heard that a lot of times a fawn will come into heat the same time as its mother did. So it may take, whatever, you might have that situation you brought up where that doe doesn't come into heat or doesn't get bred until, January or December or whatever it is, some oddball month compared to the rest of the rut. And then that fawn is going to have the same cycle. So normally, like up north, the fawns that are not born at the right time would die due to starvation or being too cold or that kind of thing. But really in South Florida, you don't have those pressures. I mean, a fawn could be born any time of the year, and there's food year round, and there's the temperatures are the only weather anomaly that I think does have a slight effect on the rut would be the water level. Right.
So, and the reason I say that is because up north, obviously they want to be bred at a certain time, so they're not dropping fawns in sub-zero degrees, correct? So down here, I feel like it's the same thing, and they want to be bred so that they're dropping fawns, early enough. So in obviously August and July, so now we're dropping fawns in January, February, March, where it's not cold down here, but it is dry. So we're not dropping a baby fawn in a place where it's just underwater. So, I don't know how well a baby fawn would survive. Typically, if she's in, let's say, an area like Big Cypress where it's very wet, and she's dropped in July at the peak of the wet season. So I'm not sure how well that would work. So I think the water levels tend to affect when the rut peaks. I think at the peak of the water level, the rut kind of kicks off the best. And then it kind of, the deer, I don't know if it's it's a knowledge thing or if it's just a sense, over the thousands of years, they come to realize, okay, the water peaks. Now it's going to start going back down. Let's go ahead and get this thing done. That way we're dropping fawns in 6 months when the water is gone.
Yep. Well, I mean, it just makes sense that the most fawns would survive when they're born, when it's dry. So then they're going to be on the same cycle as the doe. So, over time that makes sense. But it also, I can see how there'd be an anomaly if there's a doe group that's got a nice dry area. Yeah, maybe their cycle's a little off of everybody else. So, of course, it's cool because we're just doing a podcast, but we totally got off track already. So, tell us how did your archer season go? Then, were you able to hunt much during archery?
I was able to get out a good bit during archery. I'm very fortunate. I have access to an orange grove that has a decent deer herd in it, and it's an interesting hunt. So I don't sit in tree stands. I don't sit in ground blinds in the grove because you can just drive around and find deer. And so I typically try to stalk. And it is extremely humbling. I will tell you, I have been burned so many times. I will stalk a deer in the woods any day over stalking a deer in that grove. It is amazing. They're almost always in herds, 3, 4, 5, 6 at a time. And the trees were skirted, when I'll explain what that is, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, maybe a little less, for mechanical harvesting. So from basically about your mid-thigh to the ground, there's no branches. So down low, they can see in 360 degrees all the way around you. You cannot, unless you're crawling on your knees. But your shots are also limited. Anyways, I had a pretty good archery season. I managed to whack a doe first week of archery, so I was able to put some meat in the freezer, some fresh meat, and so that was nice. And then second to last weekend of archery, I managed to harvest a decent 8-point, a buck that I call Randy Couture. I shot at this buck the second week of archery, and I didn't range him. And in the grove, every deer I've shot at has been fully alert for the last 5 years. It sucks. And shooting at deer that are fully alert with a bow, they tend to duck the string. Well, I didn't range him. I shot him for 40. He was 30. He managed to duck the string. I would have still high lunged him had he not ducked the string, but of course he did. Right after that, a buddy of mine he's got a really good camera. He took a picture of me still stalking that buck with the buck in the background and me standing there with my rangefinder. And so I'm kind of all blurry and the buck is in the background in full focus. So we got to look at him. We got a pretty good look at him. Well, he's got some messed up ears. Something's wrong with his ears. And so we were like, man, he's got cauliflower ear. So we named him Randy Couture. And for whatever reason, this buck was a homebody. He stayed in a very, very, very small area of that orange grove. And so we were able to basically, with the exception of the very first time that I hunted the grove, find that buck. And so my buddy Eric, actually the one that took that photo, he shot at him at 34 yards, and he shot him for 30. He ducked the arrow. We had a very close encounter with him the week before that, where we had him at 25 yards, just couldn't get an arrow to him. And then in the last morning, there was the three of us, Jordan, me, and Eric, and we're all wearing Bluetooth headsets so that we could communicate directions and things of that nature while stalking. So the three of us could kind of communicate and work together. And I happened to spot the buck in the very same place that Eric had shot at him the week before. After he shot at him, the buck went north to a big canal and then turned right and went down that embankment all the way to a road that crossed the canal, and then he crossed it and went into the north block of the grove. So I spotted him down there 300-400 yards away, and we sat there in the vehicle and watched him. He walked away from us, hit the ditch bank, and then turned right, just like he did the day that he was shot at, after he was shot at. So I had a pretty good idea that he was going to walk that entire ditch bank down to that road. All I had to do was get there ahead of him. And so I managed to get there ahead of him. One guy got out and kind of went around behind the deer and watched him so we could keep eyes on him the whole time. And the two of us went down and got ahead of him. And of course, being hunters, we had 2 video cameras in the truck, didn't grab either one of them. We both grabbed our bow and ran down there. And I knew Eric, my buddy, really, really wanted to shoot this buck, but I also really wanted to shoot the buck. And so we played rock, paper, scissors over the buck to see who got a chance to shoot it. And I won. I was successful. He stepped out at about 18 yards, and Eric filmed him with my cell phone, and footage came out pretty good. I put it right through. I put a rage through his front right shoulder, and he didn't go 80 yards or so and went down. And it was pretty exciting. It was nice because a plan finally came together after being burned for 4 weeks in a row by this buck and many others. We finally were able to get ahead of one, figure out where he's going, get there before him, and not get busted in the meantime. So it was actually pretty nice. I did make a couple of hunts down in Big Cypress. Didn't get a chance to release an arrow. Did see a couple of nice bucks, but just didn't get a chance. Didn't have a shot that I felt comfortable with. So I didn't take one.
I know we're trying to work our way through your deer season right now, but you're so over the top. Let me just say, maybe overly ambitious and getting after it. Have you ever been out west to hunt like elk or mule deer or anything like that?
One time, I got a chance. I went to Oregon, and I did a little bit of elk hunting out there in Central Oregon, in the Bend, Oregon area, and didn't even see an elk. Actually, saw a lot of mule deer. Did not see an elk. It was a quick, like a 4-day hunt. I wasn't going there specifically for hunting, but I figured why not. But no, my dream is a bull elk with a bow and a caribou with a bow. But that's to come. I'm actually I'm planning a trip to Arizona. I've got a good buddy that lives in Tucson, and he wants me to come out and glass Coues whitetail with him. And that looks like an absolute blast. Just stalking, through the mountains and glassing for hours and hours from peak to peak.
Hey, Adam, before this, Ryan did not know what a podcast was. Are you getting the feeling Ryan's about to have like a solo podcast after we finish this episode?
I have a feeling, Ryan, that you're going to get other messages later on with people asking you to be on their podcast, just so you know.
Okay.
That happens. Okay. It just happens.
Yeah.
But the rule is, once you're on somebody's podcast, you can't go on anybody else's. You're like,
okay,
to down south hunting now. So
okay, sounds good.
That. Yeah.
Sounds good.
So this like Orange Grove thing is kind of crazy. I guess I don't know anybody else that hunts in Orange Grove. Do you guys you're just like driving the access roads in a truck, looking for the deer?
Yeah, you just drive and somebody's looking right and somebody's looking left, and because every 20 feet there's another set of trees, and you just driving and looking, and you would think like, okay, wow, you spot a lot of deer. The deer in that grove can vanish on you. I mean, it's unbelievable how an animal can vanish in there. You think, okay, there's a row, and then there's a tree, and then there's a row of trees, and then there's a clearing. Man, they can just absolutely vanish. But yeah, that's how we do it. I mean, you can set up on the crossings and things, but I'm a little impatient in the grove just because I can get in the vehicle and stay in the AC at least for a period of time in August when it's rather warm. And I know I can drive around and spot deer. I may not get an opportunity, but at least I know I can drive around and spot deer. It makes it a little more difficult to sit on, say, a ditch crossing with the sun beating down on you in a ground blind. So yeah, we just drive. We drive, and it's kind of I don't know. Do you guys duck hunt at all?
Not yet. No, something
Okay.
I need to get into. Adam, you don't really duck
So-
hunt either, do you?
Nah, I've been, but nah, I'm not a duck hunter.
Yeah, so I got into duck hunting a few years ago. And one of the things I love about duck hunting is that you're sitting in the weeds or in the blind. You don't have to be super quiet. You don't have to be super still. You're kind of just sitting there with your buddies, your family, your kids, whatever it happens to be, and you're talking and you're chatting and you're just having a good time. You know, you're just being in the woods and being with your friends. And that's kind of the draw to just getting in the truck and just riding. You know, we call it trolling. So you can troll offshore for mahi and dolphin and these different things. And we troll the Grove roads for bucks.
And you know what? If it weren't for the fact that you just told us all about Big Cypress and how you hunt in there, I may question like your, what kind of hunting you're doing. But it's like two polar opposites. One, you're just riding around in the AC. And the other one is you're going out in the swamp for 7 miles. So obviously it's just a love of hunting regardless of, what goes behind it.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
So these deer in the orange grove, are they like, do they have like specific bedding areas and stuff, or is it, they're just kind of bed anywhere under the orange groves, or how does that work?
And that's another part that's rather difficult is they bed. Okay. So the grove that I hunt, you have a row of trees. And so if you're looking down, you're looking north and you've got trees on your right side and you've got trees on your left side, and they're planted 24 foot on center. Okay. So you've probably got about the width of a vehicle you can actually see down the grove because the trees grow in. And then to the next, just on the opposite side of either side of those trees, there's a small ditch, like an irrigation ditch. And so the deer will typically bed on what I call the middle or the center, the top, so that they can see in 360 degrees. So unless there's really tall weeds, getting close to a bedded deer is difficult. I've done it. It requires you being on your belly in a ditch, crawling with the snakes. I actually shot a really good buck my very first year in the grove, a really funky rack, but he was bedded with a doe, and I managed to crawl up on him and take a 40-yard shot. And fully alert, of course, he ducked and turned, and it hit him in the back of the head. He didn't run very far. I don't recommend head shooting deer if you can avoid it, which I wasn't trying to. But yeah, no, they bed anywhere they want to. They feed absolutely everywhere. And so there's no funnels. And that's another reason it's difficult to stand hunt or still hunt. There's no funnels. And there's some sections of woods in the grove. The deer prefer to be in the grove than they do in the woods. It's an interesting area. I mean, there's oak hammocks and things of that nature, and I've put cameras up in the oak hammocks, and I get a few pictures here and there, mostly just bears. But the deer prefer to be out in the grove where they can see, where they can move. They bed anywhere they want to. They feed everywhere. Everything is food for them. Everything is bedding for them. So there's no rhyme or reason to where they're going to be on any given day.
So is this like family property or a lease or buddy's property?
It's a friend of mine's. The grove manager. I used to work in the grove. I used to spread fertilizer and soil conditioners for the orange groves down here in Collier County, and with my stepfather's business. And him and I became very good friends. We fished a couple of tournaments a year together and things of that nature. And he deer hunts for the meat, so he'll go out there on opening week of rifle, maybe in doe week. And other than that, he doesn't really care to hunt deer anyways. He's a turkey hunting fool.
Okay.
But, he doesn't really care to deer hunt. So he says, yeah, if you want. And there's a balance. He wants deer in the grove, but he doesn't want too many deer in the grove because they become a nuisance at that point. And then they have to get depredation tags and then annihilate them. And I don't like to see that happen.
Yeah. I think it's kind of common with farmers to like not be that into hunting because it's kind of like, it's easy. They're always out there. You just go, and especially if you got depredation permits, it's kind of like, you just go shoot them whenever. And, of course the meat's good.
Yeah.
But I do think like for farmers, there's kind of a nuisance, it's, it's kind of different.
Yeah, it is. And that's another thing too. Like I could absolutely be in the orange grove with a muzzleloader. I could be out there with a rifle and there would be no challenge. I would drive and I could literally just shoot them out of the window. I don't hunt in the grove with a rifle or with a muzzleloader, really. I have. I don't choose to do so. I'll actually choose to go kill myself in the swamp to do it versus go to the grove to do it, because it's not an adventure. It would be like walking in a smokehouse and opening the door and grabbing a rack of meat and, heading home with it. Sure, it's fun. It's a good time, but it's not an adventure. It's not a challenge. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy.
You're not wading through the Everglades?
I'm sorry?
I said you're not having to wade through the Everglades?
No, definitely not.
All right, so one more random question before we move on from the grove. They have problems with citrus canker down there? Is that going to be an issue where like the future of the grove is in trouble, or is they pretty solid?
No, the groves are always in trouble. And I don't even know that canker is top 10 on the list anymore.
Oh yeah.
There's so many different diseases and citrus canker and Greening's disease and different types of bugs that spread different things, hurricanes. So yeah, no, I'd say that the citrus industry is overall doing pretty well, but there's always something new that is keeping them on their toes.
So there's nothing imminent. Was kind of wondering if it's like, man, we really got to take advantage of this next couple of years because we don't know how long it's going to be around. But it sounds like, if they've made it this long, there's no reason to think they can't keep fighting. Yeah, I mean, they're putting in resets. Every year they're putting in new trees. So, I mean, I would say it's going to be around a while. I sure hope so. I love good orange juice. Yeah. All right. So you mentioned getting out to Big Cypress some during archery too. Nothing too eventful there. Is that right? No, I did just 2 mornings. I was able to get down 2 mornings, and hunt. And, first morning was an interesting hunt. I've got an area that I've hunted for a few years now. And the thing I love about this particular spot is the buck to doe ratio is very good. If you see a dozen deer, you're going to see 3 legal bucks. Just for whatever reason, that's just how it's been in this particular area, which is not like most of Big Cypress. And so I've enjoyed hunting that. This year, it sounds like somehow everybody that wanted to hunt within 20 miles of that area was hunting that area. There was a stretch of road that's 20 miles long. Not all of it's accessible. And there were 6 vehicles parked on that road. All 6 of them were within a mile of me. So I only hunted that spot 1 time this year. I did see a decent little buck, and then pulled out and then hunted another spot in archery. Didn't really see the movement that I wanted to. I didn't get a chance to really get down and scout. I was kind of going in blind, just going off of previous knowledge from the years past. So like I said, I only got to hunt 2 mornings. I did see decent bucks both times. One was a pretty good 8-point, and I managed to. I actually bumped the deer. They winded me before I ever even saw them. They were up in a little cypress head, and I kind of came around the edge of it, and they jumped and ran out and stopped about 50, 60 yards. And I couldn't see the buck at the time. The doe was standing there kind of looking around. I don't think they ever really saw me. They smelled me because I was sweating like crazy. And I kind of ease around the corner, and there's a 8 or 9 decent buck, not real wide, but a decent buck, probably a 3-year-old. And they moseyed on off. They ran across the field and stopped over at the other cypress head, and just kind of went back to normal everyday life, like nothing was wrong. So I almost got a shot. This is the one that I grunted back in, the doe and the buck, and I was kind of stuck out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, we're 200 yards apart. Between me and them is nothing but sawgrass, a prairie. So we're talking middle thigh high sawgrass and grass. And so there's really nothing to get behind. Not only is it thigh high, but the water is shin deep. So getting down on your belly and crawling through that kind of gets a little bit tricky. I actually pulled some toilet paper out and got down in the grass. Once I got close enough to the deer that they kind of noticed me, and they started looking my way, and I pulled some toilet paper out of my bag, just thinking, what am I going to do? Maybe I can use their curiosity to bring them in. And so I grunted a few times, and I
took a few steps toward me, and I just took the toilet paper and kind of flicked it up in the air, just on the top of the grass, thinking maybe, you know, like a deer tail or something. And for whatever reason, they came my way. The doe came back into 40 yards. The buck was not far behind her. However, he wanted to really find out what I was. So he circled downwind as he came in. And as soon as he hit the 60-yard mark, which is where I feel pretty comfortable taking a shot, he caught my wind. And therefore, I did not get a shot, which I'm actually quite glad I didn't get a shot, because had I killed that buck, I probably would have killed myself trying to get out. At that point, I was 3 miles in by myself, and I barely made it out as it was.
So I feel like I'm always the one that's asking the random question, but you're 3 miles back. If you'd killed this deer, would you have packed him out, or would you?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. I was hoping
Absolutely.
you wouldn't try to drag this thing.
No, the only way I would drag is if the only way I would drag would be to leave the deer fully bodied and gutted with guts in and everything, and float them out if the water is deep enough. However, This particular place, there was about a 3/4 mile stretch where the water was not deep enough to do so. So I would have absolutely backpack them out. Yeah.
Are you accessing any of this property by boat or canoe, kayak, or anything like that?
Yes. There's a lot of times there's canals that have to be crossed just to even access the property, and so duck boat or a canoe or kayak just to get across. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Which is your best?
Have you tried to stand up? Sorry, Adam.
No,
have you tried to stand up paddleboard? I've seen a lot of guys.
I haven't tried one yet. No.
In the blades.
I've looked at them, and I think it's a great idea, but I haven't tried one just yet.
That's a good idea.
Don't fall in with the gators, though. You gotta be like pretty sure of yourself crossing those canals on your paddleboard.
Yeah, some of those canoes can be a little bit tipsy as well. Whew.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. What's your vessel of choice? I mean, I do some kayak hunting, and I recently upgraded to like a larger kayak because, man, I'm just tired of getting wet. I'm tired of like almost falling in. So I did get a bigger kayak this year. What are you paddling across there with?
Luckily, it's only about a 25-foot canal, 25-foot spread, maybe 30 feet spread. So just typically a canoe, or a duck boat, like a layout boat, which is similar to a kayak, just something wide, fairly wide, stable, lightweight, easy to pick up and carry. But yeah, I'm only going, 30 feet maybe at most. So just being able to get across the canal is all I'm looking for the purpose of bringing the boat. So I don't get too concerned too much. John boats are okay, but then, you run into the area, or the problem of loading and unloading, and there's a guardrail I got to go over across. And sometimes the ditch bank is pretty steep sometimes. So depending on how high the water level is. So typically it's just a canoe or a duck boat.
Are you just parking along the side of the highway a lot of these times to access these areas?
Yep.
Yeah. Is it 75 that runs right down through there?
75 does run straight through east and west. However, you can't really access from 75. There's an 8-foot chain link fence with barbed wire on top of it. And I have done that before with ladders. But the highway patrol doesn't really like you parking on I-75.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was wondering. Yeah.
Yeah, I got a ticket once.
I hope you got something. I hope it was worth it.
They can't just let you go hunt, can they?
Yeah, right. Can't hunt off the side of the interstate.
No, I guess not. No matter how wide the median is. Yeah. So no, yeah, there's some areas. There's a lot of dirt road to access in there as well. But some of the areas there's one unit that's archery only, and there's no vehicle access. It's 4.5 miles wide. There's no vehicle. The wording, the verbiage is no motorized vehicles. So nothing with a motor on it. So I'm guessing best case scenario horse. If a horse would go down there, they might have some problems walking around at times. I guess they got 4-wheel drive, so that would be better. But and bikes, there's a few tram roads that you can go in on by bike, but other than that, it's foot traffic. So, and then, like I said, it's 25 miles long by about 4.5 to 5 miles wide. And so you're either parking on east side or the west side. One's a dirt road, one's a highway.
All right. So
And
okay, everything we've talked about at this point is not even really the reason that we wanted to have you on. So this has been really good, Ryan. But let's get into this epic hunt that you just recently got back from. So
Okay.
just I guess take us to the beginning of like where this idea came from and what you decided to do and why.
Okay, so this isn't a new idea for myself. I grew up hunting the cypress. My great grandfather used to own a piece of property down there. There are still a few landowners out in the Everglades. My great grandparents didn't really fight the government when it came time for that. They just kind of gave it up. So unfortunately, we lost the ownership of the piece of property. However, we still camp at the very same campsite when we go in by Swamp Buggy. But we used to access this a completely different way, and go in over a completely different way. And at that point, we were able to buggy hunt quite a bit. So, I grew up riding swamp buggies and, 5, 6, 7 miles across the prairie with pine heads and cypress heads and people run deer. And I never really got too big into that, but my parents did it. My family, they would do that. And so back when I was about 16, 17, so roughly 20 years ago, they closed it. They closed access to most of the Everglades, most of the cypress, to swamp buggy traffic, and made it a designated trails only. So that basically took away accessing probably 50% of the cypress by motorized vehicle. And so areas that I know fairly well that used to hold a lot of game back when we did buggy hunt are still there, still holding game. There's just no way of accessing it without walking and carrying all your gear in and doing it that way. So I've done it a few times. A couple of my family members have done things similar to this. This just happened to be one of the better hunts. I've typically done this in later in the year when it's a little cooler and the water's a little lower, for obvious reasons. But my cousin Wyatt, he's a little younger. He's 22. I felt good about bringing some younger guys in there with me. And his dad I grew up hunting. His dad's a little closer to my age, and we grew up hunting down there together. And I hunt with his son because he's too old to walk like that. But we built game carts that are kind of built for big cypress. So there's a single wheel. You do have to carry a little bit of weight. It's kind of like a wheelbarrow, just longer and really lightweight. You can pull it, you can push it, you can change the directions. And we decided that we wanted to go hunt and stay in there and be able to access this area that really nobody else gets a chance to do. I mean, very few people do. If they do go in there, they're out the same day. They're not spending a lot of time in there. So he and I and a good friend of his, we left Friday night. We left the truck at 6:00. We managed to get to our camping site, which was about 3/4 mile short of where we actually wanted to go. Good thing we stopped there, because we were just too exhausted. We couldn't really carry on. And unfortunately, down here this time of year, when you're working that hard, you just can't drink enough fluid to stay hydrated. It's just, at least I can't. So
unless you just stick your face in the water and drink the Everglades straight from the source, right?
Swamp water. I'm going to have sawgrass growing out of my ears here soon. Yeah. So we ended up getting to our camping spot about 10:00. So we were close to 4 hours worth of dragging our equipment in, and which consisted of, tents, tarps, all of our food, waters, backpacks, guns. We did not bring any tree stands. We didn't want to carry that extra weight, and everything that goes along with it: machetes, lighters, waters, Gatorades. And so we had two game carts, 3 hiking pack, like camping packs, and took us about 4 hours to get to where we wanted to go. So it was about 10:00 at night when we got there, got camp set up and everything. Did see a few deer on the way in. Really, it just kind of stems from wanting to get back in and hunt something that's kind of hasn't been touched. At least hasn't been touched this year. This was opening weekend of muzzleload for us, black powder. And typically there's not too many people that are going 3 miles in archery. And if they do, it's, they're in and out and they're gone. So we just wanted to get in there and give ourselves an opportunity at hunting some raw land, something that hasn't really had any human traffic in quite some time.
And does the muzzleloader season, does that about coincide with the rut around there too then?
Sometimes. I have seen some chasing going on in muzzleload. I did see one buck this past weekend that I would say was cruising. He was looking. He seemed like he was looking. When I say cruising, they'll kind of hit the prairie and they'll circle downwind of pine heads one after another, just kind of wind a hot doe in those pine heads, or in those cabbage heads. And so I did see one buck doing that. The rest of the bucks, I saw 2 bucks by themselves. Every other buck I saw was grouped up with other bucks. So I would say the rut, the majority of the rut is pretty well over.
So how many days was this trip?
Left Friday night, we came out Sunday.
Okay,
so cool. It was only a 2-day hunt.
So
a day and a half, really.
So I guess just kind of walk us through how the days that looked then. So you got in at 10 o'clock. What did the next morning look like?
The next morning, we woke up at, obviously we're where we want to hunt. So we don't have to get up super early. We're not tree stand hunting. So we don't have to be out and, in our tree stand before the sun comes up. And we're literally in the middle of the action. So the alarm goes off. Not that I needed an alarm. Didn't sleep at all the first night. Because you're not really bringing in a lot of big air mattresses and things when you're packing in. So it was really comfortable. But so we're sitting there kind of in the tent, just, loading our speed loaders and getting our guns ready and everything. And my cousin Wyatt said, "Do you hear that?" So I stopped real quick. I got quiet, and you could hear a deer walking 40 yards from us in the water. Plug, 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 plug. I'm like, oh, well, they're moving. Great. So we got up and we kind of just started slipping around. We wanted to hunt kind of northeast towards an area that over the last 25, 30 years has really held some really, really, really quality animals. My father killed a 10-point back in there. Oh, it's been before my son was born. So 9-10 years ago that, it was a 112-inch 10-point down in Big Cypress. And for down there, that's a true trophy. I mean, he hunted 40 years to kill that animal. And, so we wanted to kind of get in that area. Unfortunately, when we got there wasn't that much sign. We hunted all the way across we kind of spread out 300-400 yards apart and just start easing along really slow, just kind of stalk hunting, really just, into the wind, just walking as quiet as you could possibly walk, listening, stopping every few minutes to listen. And I did see a buck, a decent 8-point, I'd say kind of like the one my cousin Wyatt shot in that photo. So a decent buck, not one that I really wanted to shoot, at least opening morning. And I thought they were a bit closer to me than they actually were. Buck was kind of coming across in front of me, heading towards them. So I just paused and let it head their way. Of course, we never saw it again. But I only saw 3 deer that morning. I walked roughly 4 miles that morning. And I only saw 4 deer, which was quite shocking. I was actually just kind of blown away. When I got to the area that I really wanted to hunt, there was a good bit of sign there. There had been a fire in the area probably 2 years ago. So there's a lot of dead wood, a lot of dead myrtles, dead trees. The trees that are alive have charcoal, burn char on the outside. And in my experience, the deer don't like to rub a tree that's burned for whatever reason. Even though the tree's alive, if it has charcoal on it for whatever reason, they seem to stay away from it. So you don't really see a lot of the sign that you would typically see in an area that didn't have the fire. And when the water's fairly deep, it's hard to really see the trails and the tracks like you can when it's drier. So there was sign there. There just wasn't the amount of sign that I thought there would be after not being hunted probably for 10 years, probably not having a single human in that area for 10 years. But at the same time, there's a lot of oaks in that area. And right now the acorns are just, the oak trees are loaded with acorns. So the deer are probably up in the oak hammocks and not really having to move a whole lot. So after taking about a 5-hour nap under a pine tree, I decided to walk back west to a cypress head or a cypress strand. And that cypress strand would run south back towards where we're camping and kind of hunt my way along there. And didn't really see a whole lot there either. I saw there was a decent bit of sign. I did jump one small buck. I don't really know what he was. He jumped up about 20, 25 yards from me in the edge of the palmettos. I was purposefully trying to wind bump them, hoping they would just try to slip out the other side and I might get a shot. He didn't. He let me walk right up on him, and he jumped up and took 2 or 3 hops and disappeared into the cypress. I saw 3 on his left side, but it wasn't, it wasn't much. It was a young buck, a 2-year-old, probably with really good genetics. And so he slipped off pretty quick. I saw 2 or 3 other deer here or there. Really, it was a pretty uneventful day. It was pretty crappy, to say the least. I turned the corner around a pine head, and there's camp. I can see our blue tarp. I can see my cousin Wyatt, his friend Dominic down there, and their hunter orange, blaze hunter orange, trying to build a fire. I'm back to camp, and I'm telling you, I am ready to be back to camp. I am exhausted. I walked probably 8 miles in the swamp that day. And the entire time I'm walking, I'm taking short steps. I'm walking quiet. I'm trying to, be as stealthy as possible. Well, I see tent, I see camp. I'm like, all right, that's where I need to be right there. Right now, I'm out of water. I'm exhausted. That's where I want to be. And so I just start kind of sloshing across the field, walking straight across the field to the camp there. And between me and the camp is a pine head, and it's running. Let's see. So the camp would be, from where my position, the camp would be southwest of me. The pine head is running kind of east and west. And there's a flag pond on my side of the pine head. And I kind of come around, and right on the end of a little cabbage, there's a pretty good buck rub. I was like, oh, that's a pretty good buck rub right there. Maybe I'll just hunt right here close to camp in the morning, seeing how I've got to walk all the way out tomorrow. I'm walking across this prairie, this flag pond, essentially back towards our camp, because I can see camp. I can see my cousin, everybody right there, maybe 500 yards from me. For whatever reason, I pause and look over my right. There are 4 bucks standing there at 200 yards feeding. And 2 of them are wall hangers. And I instantly just start shaking. I lost it instantly. I look at the first one, and he's a nice little 8-point. I scan to the left, and 2 of them pick their heads up, and I don't know if their heads were together. I don't know what it was, but they were wide, they were tall, they were dark chocolate, and there were points everywhere. And I've got a black powder gun in my hand, and I'm standing here at 200 yards in the middle of an open field with nothing to rest on. I'm just like, oh my gosh. And I'm looking at camp. I'm looking back at the deer. I'm like, I'm literally 300, 400 yards from the camp, and the deer are closer to camp than I am. They just couldn't see. My cousins couldn't see them due to the pine head. They couldn't see my camp due to the pine head. And I'm just completely caught off guard. There's one little myrtle bush about 5 feet tall. I managed to slide around and put that myrtle between me and the deer, got to the myrtle bush. The wind was at my back, unfortunately. They kind of started acting a little funny. I know they smelled me. 3 of the bucks moved over to the left a little bit, kind of in the edge of the myrtles and some taller sawgrass. And I made a big mistake. I took a shot. It was a 160-yard shot. My muzzleloader is pretty accurate, my black powder gun. And it's a 45 caliber that got really popular back in the early 2000s, but apparently you can't shoot a 45 caliber in any other state than Florida that I know of. So they quit making them. But I took a shot. I could see their heads. I could see their necks. I just couldn't really see their bodies. And because of the grass between me and that myrtle bush as something to stabilize my shaking, I had to kind of crouch down a little bit, and I really couldn't see the deer. And I'm, instant, my first thought is I'm shooting 45 caliber muzzleloader. I should be able to push right through that. No problem. I'll never make that mistake again. I will not shoot unless I have a full view, or at least a 3/4 view of the body, the full body of the deer. I mean, I could see their heads, I could see their necks. I knew where their body was. I'm just not going to take that shot again. If I'd have waited, a minute, 2 minutes, I probably would have gotten a better opportunity at these animals. But I mean, if you've hunted any time and you've got excited, it all seems to happen really fast.
Yeah, I can definitely see where you're thinking, like, I'm not trying to argue for the fact of doing it again, obviously, but
yeah,
they've already kind of got your wind. I can see how, like, in the moment, it's like, you probably feel like it's now or never, you gotta figure out a way to make it happen, and seemed like a good idea at the time, right?
Yeah. I mean, and had I not shot and they took off running, I would have said I should have shot through the grass, so I don't know if hindsight's really 20/20 in this situation, but I know I've done it before and I did it again, and neither time has it worked out for me. So I don't think I'll do my best not to do that again, for myself and for the animal's sake. But I pulled the trigger and I saw water fly way behind the deer. It may not have even been the grass. It may have been me shaking. I don't know. But of course they all took off running and disappeared. I walked over there and walked around for a while, looked for blood. I knew I didn't hit them. With a muzzleloader, typically, especially at that distance, you'll hear it hit them. You'll hear the whack. Didn't hear anything. I did see the water fly way behind the deer. So I was pretty certain I didn't hit anything. 3 of the bucks went one way. The other buck kind of went back to the east. And my day was over. It was a very, very disappointing end to a very long day. However, I saw 10 deer that day, and 6 of them were racked bucks. So it was a pretty amazing day at the same time.
Yeah.
My cousin and his buddy, they saw 14 deer, didn't see a single rack buck. So, they're kind of wondering, like, what in the world's going on here, so on and so forth. Well, that night came to an end. Got up the next morning, and I decided that I was going to walk downwind and then do a loop and walk into the wind in the general direction those deer ran off to. Because I knew there was a couple of really good clearings along the edge of the cypress in that direction that were probably a half mile from the camp. Well, when I picked my muzzleloader up, I realized I didn't have my ramrod. I had left it back over at that little myrtle bush where I shot at those bucks. So I had to go get my ramrod before I went anywhere, because I've only got one shot now. So I walk over there, I find my ramrod, luckily laying right there where I was standing when I shot at those bucks. And I look up, and there's 2 does standing there feeding pretty close to where those bucks were standing the day before, the evening before that I'd shot at them. I said, all right, well, I'm already here. I might as well just keep hunting this area. There's no reason to backtrack and go the other direction to loop around. So I started cruising along nice and easy, and I spotted 4 more deer, 2 does and 2 yearlings, and they were little, like, 3-inch spikes, and they were like, I don't know, 200 yards off ahead of me in the edge of a pond. There was a little clump of trees. There might have been a pine tree, probably a cabbage tree or 2, and some myrtles. It was a little piece of high ground, a little mound that came out of the water, and that's very likely where those 4 deer were bedded. There were several beds on that when I stepped up there. But at one point, I thought I saw a 5th deer. The 4 were kind of off to the right a little bit of this little clump, and it's all wide open behind them, wide open to the right of them, wide open to the left of them. I could see everything. And at one point, I thought all 4 deer were over to the right, and I saw a head stick up out of the grass, because that's all you can see is their heads most of the time. And it was before the sun was up, so I was like, man, I think that was a buck. And I throw my binos up, and of course, as soon as I put my binos up, it puts his head down, and then never picked his head back up. So I was like, well, okay, I'm gonna slip up there, put that little head between me and the deer, creep up there really quiet with the wind in my face, and get a good look at these deer and see if that was actually a buck I thought it was. So I start sliding up that direction, and I've got about 140 to 150 yards to cover. And I'm just creeping along nice and easy, really slow. I mean, I'm not making noise. I'm not making any noise. The wind's in my face. I know they can't wind me. The only chance is if they catch movement. And they must have caught movement. They must have caught something. Crazy thing is, I never saw those deer again. It's wide open. I heard them. I heard them slipping off, but they put their heads down. They crouched down in the waist high grass and absolutely vanished. So what they saw, I don't know, but they saw something. And sometimes they can just amaze you. Crazy thing is, I'm standing there looking for these deer, and I spot the buck that I killed. So I look out. There was a small prairie, and then there was a kind of a head that kind of poked out, like a little pine head off to the right, and then a big flag pond. And on the other side of that flag pond, I saw something sticking up. At this point, the sun is just kind of cracking, and I look up and I see something just sticking up above the grass. I don't know what it is, and I put binoculars up on it. And when I look at it, it kind of looks like a tree stump sticking up with some new growth coming out of it. Sometimes down in the cypress, it was logged a long, long time ago. So there's a lot of, just like chainsawed cypress trees, and there's chainsawed, at about, say, waist high or chest high, lighter knots, lighter knots that are probably 100, 150 years old that are still standing, lighter stumps. And sometimes there's little bushes that'll grow out of the top of those. And I kind of just assumed that's what it was. I'm looking at it, and there's just stuff going all over the place. I was like, yeah, that's not a deer. And I'm watching it. I'm like, what is that? And then I see the tip of the main beam in his G3 sticking up. And I could see the fork off. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. There's deer horn. And I kind of watch it, and there was two bucks there that had their heads together. Couldn't see the ears, but they had their heads together, and their horns just looked like bushes, just kind of all over the place. And that's at probably about 450, 500 yards away. I saw that, and had they not had their heads up, I would have never spotted them. Some reason they were up licking each other or manicuring each other, whatever they were doing. I'm thankful they were doing that. I spotted these deer, and I just kind of, again, they're perfectly upwind of me. So I put some bushes between me and them and kind of started creeping. And I got up to what I think was about the closest I could get. And of course, in the meantime, I kick up two does off to my north about 200 yards. And instead of them turning and running into the bushes right behind them, they run east towards the two bucks, of course. I think it ended up working out for me. They went kind of on the north side of the flag pond. The deer were on the sort of the south east corner, and they definitely got those two bucks' attention. The bucks kind of lifted their heads up and just looked in their direction and never stopped looking that direction, which was, I'm talking 10 minutes. They never stopped looking that direction. The does were gone, and the bucks were still looking in that direction. And I got to this little head. I'm pulling up Google Maps and trying to find out if there's any way I can get closer to these deer, because I'm still at like 240 yards, and I really not comfortable with that shot. And I called my cousin, the one that saw 14 deer the day before and didn't see a single buck, to tell him that I'm stalking yet another decent buck. And he's just like, are you kidding me? Like, what do I got to do to see horns? And funny thing is, before I shot the buck that I shot, as soon as we hung up the phone, 4 deer stepped out of the head right in front of him, and one of them was the 8-point that he shot. So he actually shot his buck before I did. However, I spotted mine probably 10 minutes before he did. So it was kind of a funny coincidence. But I managed to kind of backtrack. I went back and around and up along the edge of some pines and palmettos, and looking at Google Earth, I thought I could get there without them seeing me. And using my rangefinder, I figured I would at least have a better shot at getting a bullet in one of these bucks. And from that point, I was 134 yards. And so there really wasn't anything else I could do to get closer besides laying down in the water and crawling towards them. And if I did that, I wouldn't have a rest. So I decided 134 yards was going to be what best I could do. My muzzleloader sighted in at 100, so I should be okay. And when I squeezed it off, I heard the whack. I heard the bullet hit him, And the smaller buck didn't move. The bigger buck, one that I shot, took off running instantly, kind of with his front end down a little bit and his tail tucked. So I knew he was hit hard. But of course, they ran behind the flag pond so that I couldn't see them. And so I took off running across, shin deep water, running the opposite direction, the same direction as they are, trying to see them on the other side. Because down there in the sawgrass and the water and stuff, if you don't see them go down, your chances of finding them drop exponentially. Just blood trailing a deer down there in the water is very, very, very difficult. So I wanted to at least see, okay, I can still hear a deer running in the water. I wanted to say, is there two deer? Is there one deer? If there is just one deer, is it the one that I shot or is it the other one? And so when I finally got around there and he stopped for just a split second and looked back my way, I realized that it was not the buck that I had shot. So the deer that I had shot had either fallen or stopped in that pine head on the backside of the flag pond. So I called my cousin and asked him if he'd found his buck, and he had just found his 8-point and sent me a picture of it. And I was pretty excited. I'm still shaking, breathing heavy, soaking wet from running across the field. I managed to get my muzzleloader reloaded, did not lose my ramrod this time. And I swung back around where I shot the deer from, eased over there real slow, real quiet. By the time I got there, it was probably 20 minutes after I'd shot him. Didn't see any blood, didn't see any hair, any fur, any bones, anything. Kind of just started walking in the direction in which they ran towards the tip of this little cabbage head, pine head that had some burned out palmettos in it. And got over there and didn't see him. It's like, oh, goodness gracious, where's this animal at? I said a few prayers, and I just kept circling, and probably about 15 minutes later, he jumps up, still alive. Couldn't believe it. On the edge of that little pine flat in the palmettos there, and kind of runs off into the palmettos and then falls over. And I could tell his front end is just not working, but I couldn't see him. I couldn't get another bullet to him. And so I eased up there again, and he jumps up and runs another 20 yards and falls over. So I kind of ease out of the palmettos, and I ease all the way around. I didn't want him to go any further because it was starting to get a little bit thicker. So I eased all the way out and around him and kind of cut him off. And then he turned and jumped up again and ran another 20 or 30 yards. And I get glimpses of him here and there through the palmettos. He goes down. So I got up in the pine head, and I knew he had to make a choice. He had to stay in the pine head and let me shoot him, or he had to leave the pine head, and I was going to get a shot at him either way. And so he kind of tried to run out of the pine head and stop for just a split second, and I managed to get another bullet in him at 40 yards. But man, what a will to live these animals have. You got to have so much respect for them. This 45 caliber hollow point, 195 grain bullet went in the front of his front left shoulder, went through the entire chest cavity, and came out the center of his opposite shoulder. He went close to 200 yards with no front shoulders. I mean, both of them gone, broken, shot, busted all up. And 30 minutes later is still alive. I mean, I hate to see that. I hate to do that. I try to, that's why I wanted to get another bullet in him, and I got a second shot, and I was able to put it through his lungs, and he went down really quick. But man, what a will to survive. What a will to live these animals have, and just have so much respect for them, and just why you try to make it as ethical shot as possible. But sometimes you get a little excited. And I guess if you lose that excitement, well, there's no reason to go kill yourself and do it.
No doubt about that, man. And we've all been hunting for a long time, and, shots like that happen, and we hate it for the deer, but, it is what it is sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I was just amazed that, he was able to live so long and go so far with, a 45 caliber. I mean, when I opened this animal up from the middle of his neck on his right side to his hams was solid bloodshot. I mean, from belly to backbone, from neck to hams was solid. Looked like he shot him with a 300 Win Mag. I was thinking, how in the world was this animal still going? But
now it's hot down there. So did you guys go ahead and quarter him out, pack him out straight to the truck? Yeah, just get it straight to the truck at that point to take care of the meat.
Yeah, what we did is I floated him back to the camp. I was probably less than a half a mile from where we were camping. So the other gentleman that didn't kill a buck came over there, met me, and helped me drag him over. And he thought I was a little closer to camp than I actually was, because when I shot him, I might have let out a scream of joy and excitement and adrenaline. Just a little bit. I was pumped. I was chasing this deer down in the palmettos and running around the flag pond. I could have lifted a stinking semi off of somebody at that point, which is probably why I almost passed out on the way out. All that adrenaline just killing me. But yeah, we floated him back over to the camp. At that point, we went ahead and dressed both deer. We boned out the shoulders. We boned out the neck. We took everything off the flank, the chest, the sides. We did not bone out the hams. I didn't figure there's not a lot of weight we're going to get rid of with the ham bones. There's a couple of pounds here and there. I did not even gut my deer. I did pop the ribs, the short ribs back there, and go ahead and pull the sweetbreads out of the tenderloins out. Cut the head off, because you have to have evidence, obviously, of sex, and then, horns. And then packed everything in the coolers and put dry ice on it and everything. And then started out, and you packed everything up and started out. And that's where the work really began. I thought it began the Friday on the way in, but going out after being exhausted and tired and dragging an extra 100 pounds of meat out, whew, yeah, it was quite something. But I ended up killing that buck. It's probably my best cypress buck. I've killed a lot of bucks down there. I've seen some really good bucks. I've never had an opportunity to harvest one, minus the day before I had an opportunity to harvest that buck. I blew it. But that was probably my best cypress buck. He should have been a 9-point. He rubbed off the left brow tine. Other than that, he should have been a 9-point. And then my cousin Wyatt, his 8-point was also his best big cypress buck. Not best buck, but best buck for down there. And so we were extremely grateful and excited to have the opportunity, one, to just be able to get out there and hunt, and then two, to have the opportunity to harvest animals that we were so fortunate and blessed to get a chance to see and harvest and bring home.
Yeah, so, that is really cool to be able to do that on land that like I think you said it goes back like 4 generations. Your family's been hunting that same area, and it's pretty unique. It's pretty cool that it's public land too. Like anybody can go out there and hunt that same area, but you've got the history that goes with it.
Yeah, and it was, and it's one of those things. Like Saturday at about 4 p.m, I'm walking around and I'm thinking to myself, is this worth it? Like, what am I doing? Am I really crazy? I'm exhausted. I'm like, man, is this really worth it? And about an hour and a half later, I come across 4 beautiful bucks, blow it completely, just blow it, and now I can't wait to go back.
Yeah, now they're there. Those other bucks are still there, so you got something to look forward to next year, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my cousin's going to try to slide back in there again towards the end of muzzleload. So not this coming weekend, not this weekend, but the following weekend, and then potentially he wants to go back in general gun. I don't know that I'm going to get a chance to go back in there this year. Probably not. I've had a pretty amazing deer season, hunting season in general. And if I get a chance to go again, I'm probably going to go ahead and bring my kids down for the first time and let them kind of get a feel of what it's all about. I'm not going to bring them in there. I'll take them on the swamp buggy and let them ride the swamp buggy, and they'll enjoy that and just kind of go camping. And my son is, he's 8. He's getting pretty good with the 243. So I might climb up a stand with him and, sit there for a little while and see if maybe he can put one down. But I'm not going to be greedy. I've got a good bit of meat. Like I said, I got the doe, I got the 8-point in the Grove, and I got this guy I've got to process this weekend. I do all my own meat processing. I've built a grinder, I grind it all up. I slice it, package it, and everything. So I don't really let anything go to waste. I clean the bones off really good. So I've got a good bit of meat. We eat a lot of it. We eat all of it. That's all we really eat is venison and fish. My wife likes to buy chicken, but I'll let her do that. So yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna, get too greedy, and if I push it too much, I might not be able to celebrate my 16th anniversary next year. Gotta be careful with that.
Well, you know what? If your streak continues, it sounds like I believe you got a pretty good shot at getting out there and getting it done there with your son this season. I wish you luck the rest of the season. I have a feeling if these adventures continue, we might have to have you back next year and hear more about Big Cypress. So that's pretty cool. Really appreciate you coming on with us, Ryan. It's been, we were just thinking we were in for one story, but it sounds like you've had quite the season. So it's pretty cool to hear about.
It absolutely has. Greatly appreciate you guys having me on. This was something that I truly have a passion for the outdoors and sharing the outdoors with others. That's part of why I try to video and take a lot of pictures and things. And that's why I've kind of started getting into social media just a little bit, just to kind of share those experiences. We've all got something in common. We all love this country and love what what's been provided for us, and the amount of public land access that we have is just unbelievable. So guys, really appreciate you guys having me on, giving me an opportunity to share these stories. I know I'm a little long-winded. I apologize for that.
No, man, it's good.
I'll completely understand if you don't ever invite me back on.
Yeah.
But hey, at least I got an opportunity.
We enjoyed it.
We'll be talking during turkey season. No doubt about that.
Hopefully we've developed a podcast addict out of this. Hopefully you enjoy listening and hopefully listen to some more. And what are those social media handles that some of our listeners can find you at?
Oh my goodness. I might even have to check. I think it's Ryan Keith 11 on Instagram.
Okay.
I'm not even sure. Like I said, I just set it up. Yeah. Let's see here. Not super super handy with electronic devices.
Facebook is Ryan Carter out of Fort Myers, right?
That's correct. Yes, sir. Ryan Carter out of Fort Myers. And Instagram, I think it's just Ryan Keith 11.
All right, cool.
I don't even know how to work my Instagram thing.
And hopefully we've convinced you there'll be some of those videos up.
Yeah. I'm sorry. It's Ryan K Carter 11.
Ryan K Carter 11. All right, cool, man.
Yes, sir.
All right. We'll definitely follow you and hopefully you got some more after this. But thanks again so much for coming on. We're gonna go ahead and wrap this up. But we look forward to talking to you next time.
Sounds great, guys. I appreciate it. You guys have a wonderful night.
You too, Ron. Thanks, man.
All right, guys. Say your prayers for the people in the Panhandle, and I know we are. We're out down south.
Out down south.